Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this lunch webinar. And folks that need to join can still take a minute or so to do that while we take care of introductions and housekeeping, etc. My name is Carlton Van Putten. I'm the founder and CEO of PayRent. You guys are clients of ours, so I haven't had the privilege of probably meeting everyone that's on the webinar, but I'm certainly glad you're here, and we have a very exciting and interesting discussion to have today. I will be hosting the first part of this webinar, and then I am super excited to have met and Allison has agreed to join today. She's an author, a speaker, an AI futurist, and she'll tell you a little bit more about herself later on in the presentation during her time with us today. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what we want to cover. Today's agenda is pretty straightforward. I mentioned it to you guys in the email. I want to share with you kind of a future vision for AI and what it's doing in the property management space today and where it will potentially go in the future. And then Allison is going to step in after that and talk about, how someone gets started today using AI in your business, in your workflows, and how it can actually start to immediately to save you some time, improve the professionalism and the consistency in the business, and go from there. If we have some time, we'll take a few questions at the end, and then I will make the recording available and the transcript available to anyone who would like them. I'll send out an email to be able to download that later. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Will robots take over the world? To me, the simple answer is yes. I don't want that to freak anybody out, but frankly, before there was ChatGPT, which came on the scene about a year and a half ago and blew everybody's minds, artificial intelligence was being used in many, many, many areas of life that we really weren't aware of until suddenly AI became the buzzword and everybody's using AI to do their work each and every day. And AI can actually outperform human intelligence in many, many ways in terms of computation and in terms of assessing data and information and taking in large, large amounts of information and being able to synthesize results. So it actually has been used for many years in many areas of our life. 80% of transactions on the stock exchange are actually run by bots. I don't know whether folks knew that or not, but there's just a lot of AI that goes on behind the scenes. On the other hand, AI only simulates human intelligence. It's actually not thinking. It's actually calculating the probability of providing a particular response. So it's not thinking. It doesn't actually have the ability to be creative. It can imitate creativeness and it can imitate human stuff, but it doesn't actually replace it. So how does this apply inside of your business as a property manager, as a real estate investor? I think it's important to know first off that there are some key technologies that you'll hear about in the press, or you'll hear about from maybe some tool providers or technology companies that you're talking to for operating your business, that you just need to be familiar with in order to understand what is the underpinning beneath AI, artificial intelligence. It's got some core technologies. Machine learning is one of those. Machine learning, when you hear that term, it means that your machine learning takes in massive amounts of information and data, and you train the machine to learn how to spot or assess or evaluate and provide a certain output. So a machine learning technology would be something that could, for example, tell you whether a tenant document that's provided it has a risk of being fraudulent. That's an example, right? The machine learning system would be trained on documents. It would be trained on good documents, fraudulent documents. That whole thing gets supervised, and then it can actually make a fairly good assessment of some new data that you might send to it that would tell you a little bit more about that particular document, right? The other technology that we're all super familiar with now is this natural language processing. That's a separate area of AI. It's the ability for a machine to understand what I'm saying, what you're saying, frankly, in multiple languages, to take that information in and be able to process it and then provide some type of an output or some type of a response to that. And we've seen that rise in the generative AI space, right? ChatGPT is a generative AI platform where it understands what you're saying, it understands what you're asking, and it's taking that in and then it's computing some type of a response. And so natural language processing and generative AI are the things that people are now most familiar with, but machine learning was actually one of the original technologies that's been used and applied in business. We have computer vision, which is a super fascinating and exciting place as well. Computer vision is the ability for the computer to take an image, assess what's inside the image. This is using its various natural language and machine learning competencies and being able to assess an image and provide some type of a feedback or result based on what it's seeing. Computers don't have eyes, but what it's seeing in an image that you provide it. And then robotics, of course, that has existed probably the longest in this area of AI, but it's moving very quickly now to add more competencies in the robotic space. So AI is reshaping property management. It's transitioning us from a reactive framework and a reactive model to a much more proactive management model, because you can actually monitor things 24/7. You can provide agents and provide tools that can always be on, right? You can go away. You can have a person that may be managing your properties go on vacation, what have you. And this monitoring can be an ongoing part of your everyday operation. It certainly enhances efficiency. It certainly improves the tenant experience if you get it involved in that side of the business. Allison's going to be talking about how you can just enhance efficiency just in your everyday work using tools like ChatGPT. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. And it goes well beyond the routine automation where you might set up rules and you might set up monitors that are not using artificial intelligence, but someone still has to monitor that routine, and it has to do something about it. We're moving into a state now where you can actually have AI agents monitoring and responding in a very similar human fashion. You can train them just like you can train a human, and they can do that. So overall, it's really gives you the opportunity to make your business highly efficient, highly proactive, and that translates into increased value for yourself and if you have other investors in your business. And it's an absolute strategic imperative. It's not something that is a nice to have. When the internet became the internet, people thought they didn't need a website. Well, you need a website. Now you need AI in your business in order really to be able to be strategically competitive going forward. So we're going to take a look at the core property management functions and where AI is playing a role in those. And so we're going to look at tenant acquisition and marketing, which is, I would call it, the top of the funnel. And we're going to take a look at tenant screening and leasing. We're going to look at rent collection and financial management. We're going to talk about property maintenance and repairs. And we're going to then talk about tenant communications and relations. These are the 5 key areas where you can find solutions and tools out there today that can help you in each of these areas of your business. So in AI and tenant acquisition, and marketing, of course, being able to create and automate listings that are attractive and attract more interest in your property, being able to write engaging ad copy and descriptions, being able to take images from your property and go into systems like Midjourney or others to enhance those images and make them look better. All of these things can take just a fraction of the time that you would have taken before if you use AI tools properly in this process. The other place where acquisition can be helped with AI is in this whole leasing assistant and responsiveness. You may have a metric today for how quickly you want to be able to respond to a tenant inquiry, somebody that wants to potentially rent your unit, your property. And maybe it's 24 hours response time, and you're providing that today. Well, that's becoming an unacceptable response time at this point. Now people want instant response from you, and they want it in a way that's more human and less of a sort of just a canned message back to them that somebody will get back to them. You can actually work with AI assistants or design AI assistants, and there are platforms that can help you do this, where you can have an entire conversation with a prospective tenant using AI to pre-qualify them and even take a look inside of your systems for your calendar, schedule those things going forward, and then even provide virtual enhanced tours and showings and things like that. So your response time goes from a day to instant. And of course, that impacts your ability to fill that vacancy and how quickly you can actually fill that. So some of the research that we've done shows that an increase in your occupancy rate of even 5% can have a significant impact on your overall revenue in the business. So speeding up response times and speeding up things related to acquiring tenants and getting them onboarded is critical. The second area of importance is in the tenant screening and the leasing process. Today, I'm sure most folks use some type of a tenant screening service. And these are kind of background checks, criminal records checks. Maybe you do some type of a paycheck or employment check, things like that. The challenge with all of that, quite frankly, is that those kinds of documents or those types of background checks don't really tell the whole picture. It doesn't tell necessarily whether they actually can afford the property. There might be fraud that's created with fake pay stubs. There might be documents and other things that could be fabricated, frankly, using AI that could lead you to believe that this is a valuable, and worthwhile tenant to pursue, when in fact they are intent on committing some type of a fraud and moving into your property and staying there without paying a rent. And so being able to apply some type of machine learning and being able to look inside of their bank information, being able to get a hold of and evaluate whether the documents are fraudulent or not, and being able to assess that, needing those tools to prevent those types of things can be a lifesaver. $16 billion problem fraud is in the US. 93% of landlords have experienced some type of tenant fraud in their history of owning properties. And so being able to apply tools, technologies from AI into the tenant screening and leasing process is another critical part of your business that you'll need to look at going forward. I think we're going to talk a little bit about that in a bit too. And then on the financial management side of things, AI can help with things like pricing your properties correctly, pricing them properly, pricing them in a near real-time way, being able to get a hold of and analyze real-time data for demand in your area and for prices in your area, and then letting artificial intelligence do the deep research and the analysis on that data can shave days off of your time for trying to figure out what's the proper amount to be able to rent this property for, so that we're right in market and that the interest in the property is where we need it to be, and we get the right number of tenants that apply, and we're able to fill that vacancy. Dynamic pricing algorithm tools exist out there. Well, I'd be happy to share some of these things with you at the end of the podcast, at the end of the webinar as well. Um, but being able to optimize your rates, to be able to optimize your revenue, um, and even go so far as using AI to do forecasting and financial analytics has really come a long way. There's a company called AI Dev Labs that actually is able to produce through AI, 13-week cash flows and other types of actual financial documents just by taking in some basic data from your QuickBooks or from whatever ERP system that you're using to manage your finances in. Of course, being able to automate and report things, being able to process invoices fully from end to end without human intervention and contact, using AI just gets smarter and it just gets better with each iteration of some of these AI technologies that are moving at light speed today. And then there's AI in property maintenance and repairs. So being able to plug your systems, your property systems, into internet networks and being able to feed that data into systems that can actually monitor and predict future failures before they occur saves a ton of money and reduces your overall need to give rent reductions or give credits to people when things aren't working the way they need to work. And so it's important to be able to look at the property maintenance and repair area of the business as well and apply AI technologies to automate work order management. You can do end-to-end work order management today where a human doesn't have to intervene at all. You have a list of vendors. You have a problem that you need to solve. AI can actually make that decision as a trained agent. Reach out to that vendor, have the repair done. You can have them take photos of the repair that's being done and use computer vision to verify that the repair has been done to satisfaction, and then go ahead and process that actual vendor payment to go out on to the vendor that actually did the repair. So there's the ability to take humans out of the loop in the property and maintenance repair area in a pretty significant way. This is a very large investment area for these Internet of Things companies that are building AI systems to monitor buildings and help to reduce costs overall. And then the last area, of course, is in AI tenant communications. People want responsiveness. They expect to chat with someone live. We experience this ourselves every day. It's the middle of the night and people want to chat with somebody and fix a problem. They don't want to wait 24 hours. They don't want to wait 8 hours. They want instant gratification. And so this is actually one of the areas that is probably one of the easiest to adopt early on. And there's lots of options for being able to integrate this into your business today. Creating virtual assistants that are smarter than just a frequently asked questions bot, but someone that can actually look into the tenant's history, know the tenant's other engagements, or given context for how much communication they've done with you in the past, being able to have a personal conversation with this individual, and then being able to execute a series of tasks that are sanctioned and approved by you as the property manager, that they can carry out on your behalf immediately for the tenant, drives tenant satisfaction way up, and of course that increases retention. Tenant satisfaction and retention go hand in hand. So being able to listen to and respond to tenants is one of those areas that is probably one of the lower hanging fruits to think about as you begin to think about where you might deploy AI technologies into your business. So given that the future of AI, a lot of the time people have questions about, okay, well, that's all fine and good, sounds great. I have no idea where to start with any of this. It's really overwhelming, and the technology is complicated. Um, and so, I asked Allison to kind of speak to this topic. Where do you start? If you're just brand new to artificial intelligence and this seems overwhelming and intimidating, how can you start today to think about where you can start to sort of drop in these various technologies, and how can you start to use these things in your everyday work today? And so, Allison, I want to turn the floor over to you. I want to thank you for joining us today, and maybe you can just give everyone a little bit of a background on yourself and why you're talking about this topic.
Thanks, Carlton. It is a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak a little bit more about AI. And as you laid out in the beginning, there are so many applications coming down the road, and it can be very confusing. I have used AI data and analytics tools to grow company value for a long time. Sometimes I like to say, like, since websites were coded on stone tablets, it seems like forever.
Right.
I've really enjoyed that, and I am currently running a series of AI workshops to help empower those business leaders as I help grow their companies. On the side, I also manage 3 properties, and I have a ton of respect for the work that property managers do. It is not easy. And as you can see on the screen here, I wrote a book during COVID about a hidden source of power in the data called customer equity. And all that sounds so impressive until you realize that most business readers are so exhausted, they fall asleep by page 12. So I deeply love data analytics and AI. And when it's used correctly, I truly feel it can make our world a better place. And what I'm presenting today is a shortened version of my 101 workshop. We're going to hit it pretty hard. We're going to get a lot of information in a short period of time. And I will give you cues about certain places where you might want to take photographs. But let's get into it, and we can start making your world a little bit better with AI. When I'm using the term AI, I'm also referencing ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is basically the Google of AI. It has been the market leader now for about 2.5 years. It has the largest user base out there. It was the first one out of the gate in November of 2022. And it comes the closest as a general use AI. It is also the AI that sits behind other AIs. So Microsoft Copilot, for example, is a skin over top of ChatGPT. And so the same way that we might tell someone to go Google it, and we don't say, pull up your search engine or go to Lycos or Alta Vista or any of these little tools. I know you're smiling if you know what those tools are.
Yeah, that's a blast from the past.
Then it's kind of the same way that we say ChatGPT. So you can think of AI as your hyper intelligent, newly hired assistant, like a very bright college freshman. I sometimes call him Skippy. And Skippy really wants to please us. And because he's trying so hard to please, he tends to have one problem, which is in the effort of delivering value back to us, he tends to trip all over himself. And it's the same with AI. It feels like magic initially, then sometimes there's a little bit of disappointment, and that's usually because we are not using AI correctly. For example, telling AI to write a letter to an angry tenant about their deposit would be an example of an incorrect usage. This is a very rough instruction. So if we think about Skippy, that college freshman, what would a college freshman do with this? Well, they would do their best. They might look around a little bit, but their ability to hit the mark might be way off because we haven't given it more specifics. If we gave it more specifics, something like this, act as the owner of a property management company and write me a letter with the specific problem, action, solution framework to respond to my angry tenant about their deposit. And I give it more context about the tenant lives in Oregon and reference their lease and their email messages. The letter should address each concern and give some respectful closure in order to help the tenant understand this is not a negotiation. And then finally, don't cite any laws or regulations outside of Oregon. It's completely irrelevant. So this large, rich context is actually based on a real example that I had. I had a tenant that was approved for 2 dogs. They adopted an unneutered Rottweiler from the side of the road.
Oh boy.
And then they took in a 4th dog to boot. So the tenant fortunately moved out, but there was a lot of dog damage, and I needed to make deductions from their deposit. Now, I'm not a professional property manager, so I need to make sure that I'm doing right. But at the same time, I'm feeling a little bit like, a little tense about this and starting to feel a little unhappy. And I want a way to maintain the professionalism and get what I want. So this is one example of how we have put that rich detail together, but what's really behind this? There's 2 components. When we speak to AI, we're looking for, one, what is the right task? In this case, it was to write a letter to an angry tenant. That is the right task for AI. I didn't ask it to paint my house with drones. And the other side is the right instructions. That's where we have a lot of rich detail. The combination of these 2 is the best usage. Today, we're going to talk a lot about the right instructions, which are basically prompt engineering. So you might have heard this term. And the key thing to remember is that prompt engineering is just talking to AI. So you don't have to be a coder. You don't have to be a technical person. It's a communication skill. And because it's a communication skill, it can be learned as a set of structured instructions. And that's what we're going to learn now, is this structure of how to get AI to give us the best results. If you have a ChatGPT account already, you are free to log in. Otherwise, for the sake of time today, I would recommend that you not fuss with it, maybe do it later, and just follow along. If you have an account, you'll use the starting prompt, write a letter to an angry tenant about their deposit, and then follow along with the different twists that we give it. Now, I know you might be wondering, so we'll take this brief detour. What's the difference between a free and paid account, Allison? I always hear this. And these are the current differences. They do change. But right now, the biggest value in a paid account is the file upload and the memory versus a free account, which does not have these things. The memory just continues to provide more context to you. And you should know that most people are free monthly or weekly users right now. There's only about 1.5% of the US population that are paid. So you can do a lot with the free version. And you do not need a paid version to go through this example. All right. So our framework for instructions is going to follow the Risen framework. This comes from Kyle Ballmer, he's a fantastic speaker about AI. You might see him on TikTok occasionally. He came up with this framework, which I particularly like because it's very durable. Whether you are a beginner or whether you are an advanced coder and you're, speaking to AI through the API layer, you can use this same framework. It's very resilient. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk through these 5 steps. And if you had taken, or if you decide to take the 101 workshop, we would play with each of these steps a little bit more. But today we're going to go through them on just this one particular example due to our time constraints. So let's start with the first step. What role or persona should AI adopt? We start our prompt with an explicit role declaration. Because AI can be so many different things, it's very important that we tell it who to be. And by doing that, we give it a much more specific set of responses that can come back to us. So in our case, we said, act as the owner of a property management company. Well, now it's not going to give me responses as if I was a restaurant owner. It's going to give me responses of a property management company owner. If nothing else, this one tip will elevate all your usage of AI because it will become less generic. And you might have seen that when you put a prompt in, it's like, well, this kind of sounds like evergreen content that is kind of obvious, everybody would know. Start adding role to get over that challenge. Number 2, next, we're going to do the I instructions, which is where we started. Write an angry letter to a tenant about their deposit. So we can skip over this section because it's what we tend to do immediately. We tend to just give it a demand or an instruction. We've got 2 pieces in now, and now we're going to step into the third one. Are there specific steps to follow? If we think about Skippy, our hyper intelligent assistant, what we would normally do with that person is try to give them a series of steps to follow. We wouldn't say just go figure it out, although I'm sure we all have had jobs that were more or less like that. Skippy will do so much better if we say, write a letter using the problem action solution framework, or maybe reference prior letters that I've written. In this case, we use the pass framework to respond to the tenant. We tell it that the tenant lives in Oregon, and we give it the step to reference the attached lease and prior email messages. So you can see where that paid version gets a little more powerful because I can attach context. Quick tip, you always want to attach as a PDF because most of the time, other than spreadsheets and structured information, ChatGPT will not process your Word documents. So use a PDF.
No. So this the PDF is an upload before you do the prompt.
Yes, you attach it and then you add the prompt to tell it to look at that attachment as it's processing the information. So this is our third step, which is steps, and which we are using to help communicate the process and better define the process so that we get better results. Moving on to our 4th component. When we use AI, we're sometimes disappointed in that result. And why is that? It's because we did not specify what it is that we actually wanted. So we basically said to AI, here's some things, go bring me a rock. So giving it an end goal helps us put that specification in. Now, I like to think about it as what does success look like? In my case, I wanted the letter to address each concern for the renter and provide respectful closure so that the tenant started to get an understanding, or really understood, it was not a negotiation. And what was happening before is I was addressing bits and pieces, but I wasn't addressing their whole concern. So now we're addressing everything point by point by point. End of negotiation. And that's exactly what we want our hyper intelligent assistant to do, to understand what good looks like. You can think about this as, what is it that is satisfying to you as the result? What is it that you want it to deliver? Now, the last piece is the one that we add at the very end. We do this on purpose because once we go through the prompt, we sometimes realize that there are areas where we need to tell our assistant what not to do. So in this case, we're going to narrow the focus. So I like to think about that show, What Not to Wear. Don't put polka dots with stripes. In this case, I said, do not cite any laws or regulations outside of the lease or outside the state of Oregon. And then this one you can use a lot. It's ask me 3 clarifying questions before you start. This is an excellent way to help surface the clarifications that AI needs or assumptions it might be making, but could be hard for you to see because you can't see exactly what it's thinking. So I really like that question of ask me 3 clarifying questions before you start. Narrowing of the focus is when we add the final touches to the output. Okay, so this is where we started. Write a letter to an angry tenant about their deposit. And this is where we ended, a much richer, deeper prompt. And you've probably noticed that the prompt is now much longer. That's good. That's okay. That's what we want. Now, here's a place to take a photograph. We've gone through this risen framework. I'm going to take a moment to recap it and grab a screenshot, take a photo, whatever you'd like. Risen and the prompt engineering framework is the way that we talk to AI. We talked about giving it that personality in the role, setting the instruction, which is what we tend to do automatically, giving it steps, which is the process we want it to go through, adding the end goal, which is what success looks like or what a good output looks like, and then finally narrowing to tell it what not to do. So,
and Allison, I want to chime in a little bit here because I want to tie this in to what I was talking about earlier. Really, this underpins just about anything you're going to do with a generative AI agent or assistant. So right now, people are going to ChatGPT and they're putting in this risen framework and getting a result. But this is the exact same methodology that would be used if you're going to create a chat assistant that's going to help somebody book an appointment online. You're going to have the role, you're going to set up the instructions, or the company that provides the tool sets up the instructions, and maybe you add a little bit to it. But underneath all of these type of assistive and AI tools that are there is this framework. So when people use this themselves, they're really getting an understanding of, okay, well, this is how things are going to work when I start to automate in my business and start to apply some of these AI tools.
yep, that's why I chose this framework, is because it is so durable. And this is a horse race. Things are changing all the time, and it really helps to have something that's lasting. So now that you have a handle on the basics of the power tool, what should you do with it? So we talked about the instructions. Now let's talk a little bit about the tasks. The tasks are the subject of the 201 level workshop. We're going to touch on that briefly. And it's basically, the tasks seem infinite. There's this dilemma of, all these things I could do with AI. How do I start to think about where to apply it? So I want automation and efficiency, but I don't want mistakes. I want, I don't want inaccuracies or low quality. This is what I use, and this is another place for a good screenshot or photo. This quadrant analysis is what I use with teams or clients when I'm presenting the 201 level workshop. And sadly, we won't have time to go through it as an exercise, but I will run through it with you so that you can understand how it operates. We generally start by auditing all the various tasks that the team is working on, and then we sort them into this quadrant. There are two axes, and the first one on the left is really how much time, or sometimes you can think about time as cost, that a task takes. For the most part, early usage of AI is all about time saving. And on the second axis, you can see what is the impact of that, of an error in that space. Is it a non-critical error, or could a critical error be generated? And how easy is it to remedy? So as we think through those tasks and we start to plot them, the goal is to find tasks that take a lot of time or a lot of money, and the errors that could result are non-critical. So we're shooting for the gold stars. Now, Carlton, I know you might have a slightly different way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's to me, it's very similar though. It's an impact and effort quadrant, right? So, what's the impacts of the business for putting AI into this particular workflow or for this particular task? And how hard is it to actually do? How hard is it to actually implement? So I think it's very similar, and I don't want to distract from this approach because I think this is a really great place for people to start.
I'll give you some examples for each of the quadrants. So starting in the top right, human in the loop. A great example here is legal documents. I often start with a draft of a legal document using the AI Risen framework, but I don't take it across the line until I have a lawyer review it. So I still need that expert to give me the cross check because there could be a critical error there, and I'm not willing to suffer that expense. On the bottom right, there was a great example during COVID, and maybe you heard about it. So the example is you would not ask AI to appear as you, even though you could, on a Zoom call in court. And what happened is a lawyer did appear on a Zoom call as a cat. And it wasn't that he was exactly asking AI to do it, but he didn't know how to work the controls in Zoom. And the judge actually said, "Are you a cat?" And no, Your Honor, I am not a cat. Can you imagine that, embarrassment if that had been an AI? So critical error, and it didn't really save any time. So, that's an example of the bottom right.
Got it.
The lower left could be filing a maintenance request. Depending on your system, you could have a very dialed in process, maybe a very personal process. Maybe your maintenance guy is always coming in for coffee and it's just really easy to chat about that. It's a non-critical error, but it doesn't really save time to automate it. And then the top left is where the gold is. And that's where we write a letter, or we could create an ad, or describe a property, or so many of the things that Carlton mentioned in the beginning. So
Cool.
that is our structure for the quadrant. And now I want to go on to our very last slide here, our second to last slide, which is just like a house. You have the foundations, the basics of AI when you learn how to prompt it correctly. And the question is sometimes, well, where can you go from here? What next? So the 101 level workshop covers the foundation in much greater detail. 201 talks about business assets as a library and workflows. And then we start moving up into Carlton's area as we get into custom GPT and AI applications. Carlton, do you want to talk about that?
Well, I think at the end of the day, this is about starting at the foundation, right? So, how do you start applying this to your work as a person in the business first? And then how can you take some of those things off your plate with various apps that are out there or coming online? And then can you take it a step beyond that and actually start creating your own virtual agents, your own AI agents? And all of these things are possible today to allow you as an owner or a person that's working inside of the business to spend their time on the most valuable things that only you can do rather than kind of the time-consuming things that can be taken over through more sophisticated automation and AI. So yeah, that's all I would add for that.
As you go through the process, you learn a lot about what good automation might look like. Some things that are sometimes just hidden in people's heads and you don't realize it.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about the workflow and library thing? What did you mean by that, library and workflows?
So when we learn to prompt, the time that goes into creating one of those prompts is actually creating a business asset. And the way to look at that is as if there are variables in the structure that you can flip in and flip out in order to have a much richer well of information. And the workflow is also part of that. How do I add that into my overall workflow?
So that adds systems and process to using AI is really what you're talking about there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're pretty much at time. But if you would like to think about next steps, upskilling with workshops is one thing that I offer. And Carlton can help you adopt AI technologies. Our contact information is on the bottom of each slide, and we'd be happy to take questions.
Yeah. Are there any questions that folks have? We've only got a couple of minutes here. We're actually 1 minute over time, but good timing on all this. Um, if you, I want to be respectful of that time. So if you do have additional questions, and you'd like to maybe have Allison come in and talk to your team about how to effectively deploy AI to save time and drive efficiency in the business, you should scan that QR code for them. If you're looking for just input, my background is in technology. I've built platforms. We built some behind the scenes AI machine learning technologies on our platform that help to operate the business. I'm familiar with how to implement various technologies. So if you're thinking about adopting a tool, we'd be happy to help you talk about it, think about it, and maybe help you with figuring out deployment. And if you're getting started with your team and you really want to drive consistency, that would be Allison's wheelhouse. And you can just scan that code and reach out to her as well. I really appreciate you coming and jumping in on this. Allison, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Carlton. It was my pleasure.
And folks, thank you as well. If you have any feedback, you can also hit me up directly in my email. Always happy to listen and learn from these webinars that we do. And just appreciate all of you very much. And thank you for your time. We'll make the recording available to you later. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.